and welcome to Father Ben. And we no need any introduction. Ben is known to all. So welcome to Ben and to one and all. And I hand over the session to Ben.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Just a moment. I ask you now to please mute yourselves. And we ask Saint Joseph to be with us today. Because Saint Joseph, in the devotion in the spirituality of the heart, in the Chevalier family, is the protector of those who love and honor the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. So these are the objectives that I tried to formulate for today's session. And I would like to also, in this introduction, to express my apologia pro vita mea, my apologies. I would consider this as my own tentative presentation. I think many things could still be developed. And the reason for that is I tried to remember what we did in honor of Saint Joseph while we were in the minor seminary, the prayer to Saint Joseph, besides the ejaculations we made in his honor and the feasts. And I tried to go into the writings of Father Founder, but I didn't have much access from here. So maybe Sister Merly can develop this, and many of us can develop this, those who are close to the sources. I forgot also to ask Father Hans Quackman about this. I would like to present. So the introduction, the first objective is to appreciate the role of Saint Joseph in the life of Jesus, or in the history of salvation, to appreciate the devotion to Saint Joseph in the history and tradition of the church, and number 3, to appreciate the place of Saint Joseph in the spirituality of the heart. And when I say spirituality of the heart, I just don't mean the spirituality of the heart in general, but in a very particular way, our personal appreciation of the spirituality of the heart, our personal way of living in the heart of Jesus. I would like to start my presentation with some notes from Sacred Scripture. First of all, the letters of Paul or the epistles do not mention him nor make any reference about him. Among the four Gospels, he is absent in Mark and in John. He doesn't act. He is just named. Only in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke that we find him, only the Gospels of Matthew and Luke make him part of the drama of Jesus' life. But in Matthew, we see him act, but he doesn't say anything. And in Luke, he doesn't say anything either, but he is there in the drama of the life of Jesus. And so he becomes like an intriguing character, and in this whole drama of the life of Jesus. In Matthew 1:16, which is the conclusion of the genealogy, the formula says, Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, from whom Jesus, called the Messiah, was born. So this is the first time in the Gospel of Matthew that Joseph appears in the picture, in the drama. For the Jews, genealogy was very important in order to preserve the memory of their ancestors. In the Gospel of Matthew, the Jesus story is intrinsically linked to the history of a people, in particular Israel, so that the genealogy tells this intrinsic link between Jesus and the history of Israel. Now, it is worth noting that in the way Matthew presents the history of Israel, the history that he presents is a history full of hopes and promises. It's a history full of weakness and fragility and sin. The characters there are sinful characters. A short history which represents and on which depends the whole of human history. I would like to suggest that we appreciate this very deeply, especially since each time that the genealogy either of Matthew or of Luke is read as gospel, we tend to fall asleep because of the way it is related, the son of, through an artificial account of generations, one generation after another, or three generations, one after the other. Matthew is able to build a history that ends with a concrete person, Jesus, called the Messiah. In Jesus, the history of humanity and the history of the promises of God, represented by David and Abraham, converged. So the past would converge in Jesus. And the new moment, a new time of history telling, experiencing a history, a new history, will also begin with Jesus. And again, as I said before, this is not an abstract history, but a real and concrete one. It is a history of the good and the bad, of successes and failures, of pain and suffering found in the human family, patriarchs, wise men and women, prophets, slaves, exiles, migrants, prostitutes, workers, good and bad governments. All these are told to us in a compact manner in the genealogy of Jesus in the tradition of St. Matthew. So when we are presented with that kind of history where Jesus and Joseph are involved, who can feel excluded from this family of Jesus? Who wouldn't like to belong to this family that is so full of promise, where God became flesh and a member of our human family?
Mamaya na. Init eh.
Can you please mute yourself? And take note of the significance of the intentional formula of Joseph, of Matthew. Joseph, the husband of Mary, not Mary, the wife of Joseph. So this is a very a significant formula. When you say Joseph, the husband of Mary, on the one hand, it tells of the patriarchal line. On the other hand, Joseph, the husband of Mary, Joseph belongs to Mary. So an assertion of the role of Mary. Not Mary, the wife of Joseph. Mary does not belong to Joseph, but Joseph belongs to Mary. In Matthew 1:18-25, there was the story of Joseph getting knowing of the pregnancy of Mary that was not of his own doing. So what was his reaction? And he was a just man. And so he wanted to abandon her secretly and quietly. But when we read more deeply into the text, probably Matthew wanted us to understand the mixed emotions of the heart of Joseph before such a mysterious event, because Joseph was a man of faith and he knew the fidelity of Mary. And how come this should happen at all? So there must be something extraordinary that is going on. Of course, he didn't want to embarrass Mary. Maybe he wanted the man responsible for her pregnancy to come out. But this was such a mysterious event that he felt, mixed emotions in his heart. And then there was that drama of the dream of Joseph, telling him of what actually happened. So that we have this formula, dream and fulfillment, the Old Testament promise now realized. And Joseph will be an instrument towards that realization of the Old Testament prophecy, that Old Testament promise. An answer to the questions that he kept in his heart. And Joseph, in this drama, was able to discern his vocation, and he accepted it. And the vocation is to serve the mystery of salvation. Now that he has become a legal father to Jesus, his mission has begun quietly and giving himself fully to hide and protect the mystery of Emmanuel, God with us, Emmanuel, until the completion of this mystery. Joseph found his vocation and he accepted it. Matthew 2:13-23 talks of this flight to Egypt because of the danger to the life of Jesus, and then Joseph bringing back the family and settling in Nazareth of Galilee. This drama, this narrative, is a mixture of history, of legend, and theology, which concludes Matthew's account of the childhood of Jesus. Herod's cruelty as a tyrant was well known, That's history. This evokes the experience of Moses, saved from the death from the hands of the tyrants. The killing of the innocents brings back to memory the extermination of Israelite children and the wailing of Rachel. And then the return from Egypt was in obedience to God. From Egypt, I called my son. Now, in this short narrative, Jesus is presented to us as the new Moses. And there is a new Exodus taking place. And therefore, a new definitive liberation is happening, this time from the periphery, from Nazareth, a town of Galilee. And Galilee was considered at the time a most pagan province and a hotbed of revolution because it was most pagan. It had the spirit, the soul to resist, to defy the Roman occupation. It didn't want to be Romanized. And Nazareth, which is the place of trade, the mention of Nazareth is polemical. Can anything and anyone that is good ever come out of Nazareth? Of course, this brings back also to memory the defiance of Samson, the Nazir. And in this whole drama of the new Exodus taking place, of a new definitive liberation that is happening from the periphery, and the role of Galilee and Nazareth, here is the central role of Joseph in his quiet, calm, but determined person. Joseph, the courageous person, has made all these things possible. So what is the significance of the silence of Joseph, at least in the Gospel of Matthew? He is the protector of the silence of God. You know, the God that hides, the Emmanuel until the time of its fulfillment. And Saint Ignatius of Antioch would comment, the virginity of Mary, her childbearing, and the death of the Lord were hidden from the prince of this world. 3 resounding mysteries wrought in the silence of God. I think it is very good for us to meditate on this, to look into this very profoundly. The silence of God in the operations of his saving deeds, and the silence of Joseph protecting the silence of God. We go to St. Luke. Luke 1:26 to 27. This is the account where it says, at the time when Quirinius was governor, etc., there was the temporal coordinate, and then spatial coordinate, Jerusalem and Bethlehem, that Joseph had to enroll, to register, to go to his own country. Now, Luke, after the establishing the temporal and spatial coordinates, Luke now turns to the socio-anthropological coordinate, or the socio-anthropological dimension. A young Mary, in contrast to the old married Elizabeth, is betrothed to a man, Joseph. Now, I said man Joseph, I did not say how old. There is something we need to look into later on. And betrothal was a mutual agreement of parents. But the betrothed, the parties, did not live together while mutually observing their fidelity to each other. Linking Joseph to David, finalizes the identity of Jesus. Jesus is the only Messiah, and there is no other. In Luke 2:16-20, there was this the discovery of the shepherds of Jesus in the manger, and then they were telling what was announced to them by the angels. And here in the manger, you have this serene, humble ambience of the manger. And from that humble, serene ambience of the manger rose a spectacular message from heaven, which Mary pondered in her heart. And Joseph was a silent keeper of this spectacle, the spectacle of this messiahship linked to the Davidic lineage through him. So the link to the Davidic lineage is Joseph, and yet he was not acting royally. He was acting in an humble and serene manner before this great spectacle, the great drama of the presentation of Jesus of the birth of Jesus. And then the finding of Jesus in the temple. You see the picture there, Jesus there sitting down. And I like that picture because he is sitting down and the others, the people, the adults were standing. And then behind, you see Mary, the reaction of Mary and Joseph. And Joseph probably is more calm than Mary. And Joseph watches in silence as Jesus claims God's divine paternity over him and that he would be after the affairs of his father. This is a great revelation. Your son, your adopted son, claiming in the temple that God is his father and that he is there to look after the affairs of his father. And finally, the detail or the data, the datum about St. Joseph, the worker and the carpenter. Jesus was not accepted because of the simplicity and ordinariness of his origin and of his trade. He was trained as a carpenter, a worker, after the trade of his known father, Joseph. There is a very good book by Riesner, Jesus als Lehrer. And it describes there how Jesus learned from the trade of his father, both Joseph and of course later on also his father in heaven. Now this rejection is an invitation to prophetic solidarity with the poor, the workers, the rejected, and the oppressed in society. At this moment, I would like to invite you to quiet reflection, maybe a minute or two, with that biblical presentation of Joseph in the drama of the life of Jesus. How did you see Saint Joseph before, and now did you gain new insights and appreciation from the biblical presentation of Saint Joseph? I'd like to ask you to meditate on this for a bit, and then we will go to our breakout sessions. Okay. I will bring you now to your breakout rooms, and I will continue to arrange your rooms, your presence in the rooms. You see now? Oh, okay. Okay. 6. We have to create new rooms. I have to create new rooms for you. Just a moment. Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity for you to come together in your breakout rooms. I hope you had a lovely sharing, and I would like to ask some feedback from you now. What happened in your group, what you shared. So maybe we can ask from Japan, Father Ray Tibon. Ray Tibon, yes.
Um, if I may, I would like to ask Father Jim Torho to share his reflection because that was really good.
I think your You're not coming in very clearly.
Hang on.
Okay, can you speak now? Try.
Is it okay now?
Oh, no.
No?
Can you hear me?
Sorry, something's wrong with my mic.
Your microphone is not very
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
working well.
No.
Okay,
Sorry for that.
okay. Can you text? Sorry, can you chat your reflection? We go to the Philippines. Let's go to Chacho Angeles.
Well, Joseph, for us, or for me only, for the group, Father Ben?
What you can say for you or for the group, whatever you like to share.
Okay. He is a man of faith. He, aside from protecting Jesus and Mary during their flight to Egypt, and he went back only when the king was dead or replaced by somebody else. He is a man of obedience, an instrument of God's plans, and he is also a man of strength and wisdom, because he could have not undergone these experiences without having inner strength or inner wisdom. Maybe that's because he has deep faith in God's plans, no? But I guess the wisdom and the strength comes from his faith. That's all, Father Ben, what I can remember from our sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to the group of Nicola from Italy.
I'm not in a group. I'm alone.
Oh, you were alone. Oh, sorry. I was
Yes,
able to-
but no. In the meeting here, we had the a group of. You mean the group here in this? We were 5.
Oh, okay.
Oh. So I think in our group we had a story with Saint Joseph before, and in the last years we have developed it more. It was like a tradition that we followed. I don't know about how much impact it had. In some of us, yes, it did have an impact from very young time, because they were brought up in the St. Joseph School or something like that. But of late, the mystery of St. Joseph has impressed mass on more on us, in the sense that there are still things to explore. For example, somebody said she wants to explore more the role of St. Joseph as protector of the silence of God. No, somebody else spoke about the relationship that Joseph had with Mary, Jesus, and the responsibility also within the Church of St. Joseph. No? The Pope has really reminded us of that responsibility and called upon us not to be aware of this. So in that way, sorry if I can't remember all the details, but I think more or less this was something that was said in the group.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicola. I'm looking for Sister Lovis, because she had a question. Okay, could you share with us what transpired and then maybe your question? Lovis?
Unmute.
Unmute, Lovis.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity, Father Ben.
Yep.
In our group, we were 4, and what touched us is the silence of Joseph. You know, we know that Joseph he was silent in the Bible, but now the new insight that we got is that he is also silent in the absence of, it's like he is our protector in the silence of God. when God is silent, then we can call upon him. That is the new insight that embrace us. That is the new insight that we got, that we can call upon Joseph during the silence of God. When God seems to be silent to us, then Saint Joseph is there for us.
And your question?
My question was, what is the implication of Joseph belonging to Mary, but not Mary belonging to
Yeah.
Joseph?
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
there any social connection or divinely connected?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me just say something
Is
about
my
that.
question clear?
Yes. Thank you, Lovis. Father Alonso Schukel, and poet laureate of Spain, and at the same time an Old Testament scholar, had commented on this formula. And if you look at the earlier formula with regard to women involved with men, it was always like David, for example, was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. And then you have the formula, Salmon, the father of Boaz, by Rahab, you know. So you see that the women were attached to men, and in that sense, it was like a certain, in the beginning, you could say that women were properties of men. So there was no equality. But that formula was broken when the mention of Joseph, the husband of Mary, not Mary, the wife of Joseph. So Mary now takes preeminence. There is now the kind of a corrective, not anymore the patriarchal dominance of women, but the equality of men and women in the new unfolding of the new history, beginning with Jesus. Father Ray says that he was in, he kind of looked into the Joseph silent witnessing and Joseph's discerning of this special vocation. I would like to suggest that we continue to keep these things in our heart and continue to discern and to pray with our heart on the significance of Saint Joseph, especially the silence of Saint Joseph and his protection, the protector of the silence of God, the silent God who is actually moving in the history of humanity, actually on the move. Now, I would like to continue and let's go with the sharing again. Okay. Sorry. Oh. We go now to the history of the devotion to Saint Joseph. Before the year 150, before the Common Era, 150 before the Common Era, there were apocryphal legends that delayed the flourishing of the devotion to Saint Joseph. For example, there was the Proto-Evangel or Proto-Evangelium of James. There was the Gospel of Thomas, the Coptic history of Joseph the carpenter, the Gospel of Pseudo-Matthew, and the Gospel of the Nativity of Mary. Now, what the legends say about Joseph in general, there was a fear of Joseph's being a virginal husband to Mary and father of Jesus by spiritual ties that might endanger the dogma of Mary's perpetual virginity and Jesus' virginal birth by Mary. So there was that fear. So that in the could you please mute yourself? In the retelling in the story, Joseph must be made so old so that he would have no sexual powers to make Mary pregnant. Joseph must be made so old in order that his sexual powers would be nil, would be nothing. And then Joseph was depicted as a widower with 6 children in order to explain the gospel references to the brethren of Jesus. And Joseph, according to them, Joseph was miraculously selected as depicted by his staff that is blooming, with the flowers. But, but the gospel talked of the betrothal of Mary and Joseph, a fact that was publicly known. So there was no reason to make Joseph an old man because this was known by the community that he was betrothed to Mary. And the lily, as an emblem of purity, replaced the staff of Joseph only in about 1303 or 1306 from a painting by Giotto in Padua. Now, the first known independent commemoration of Saint Joseph occurred in the 8th century martyrology. Joseph was named, again, spouse of Mary, not Mary, the wife of Joseph. And it was fixed like the March 20. However, from the Benedictine monastery at Reichenau, on March 19 was declared as the day of the death of Saint Joseph. In the Middle Ages, there was this embryonic form of the independent devotion to Saint Joseph. The faithful's growing desire to know more of Jesus and Mary led them to the recognition of Saint Joseph and his role. And we must remember this, the faithful, the sensus fidelium, like the assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Now, the call for synodality, it's very important that we take note always of the sense of the faithful. And in 1324, the Servites observed March 19 as the feast of Saint Joseph, not just a commemoration, but a feast. And probably the Franciscans also did, also in Bologna, in Italy. And the spread of the devotion to Saint Joseph. In December, the Franciscans, Peter John Olivi in 1298, and his contemporary Obertone di Casale. You have the writings of John Gerson of 1429, Saint Bernardine of Siena in 1444, Saint Teresa of Avila in 1582. And then for the first time, the feast of Saint Joseph was celebrated in Rome by Sixtus IV in 1479. And the first scholarly theological thesis on Saint Joseph was published by the Dominican Isidore de Isolani in 1522. Then, maybe 300 years after, you have December 8, 1870, Pope Pius IX proclaimed Saint Joseph as the patron of the Universal Church. In 1889, Pope Leo XIII, in his Quamquam Plurius, exhorted workers to imitate Saint Joseph rather than follow seditious men. And the seditious men, this was the time of the rising of the socialists and the communists after the French Revolution. And in 1920, Pope Benedict the 15th called on Saint Joseph to protect the laborers from socialism. And in 1937, Pope Pius XI, in his Divino Redemptoris, placed a vast campaign against communism under the standard of Saint Joseph, the mighty protector. And so in 1955, Pope Pius XII established the feast of Saint Joseph the Worker on May 1st, the traditional communist celebration of the workers. In November 13, 1962, Saint Pope John the 23rd decreed that effective December 8 that year, the name of Saint Joseph be inserted in the Communicantes. That's why we have that now in the Eucharistic prayer, Saint Joseph. And now he is described as a Blessed Joseph, the husband, the spouse of Mary, or some would say the chaste spouse of Mary. In 1989, Pope St. John Paul II came up with Redemptoris Custos, an apostolic exhortation on the role of St. Joseph in the life of Christ and in the life of the Church. And in 2020, Pope Francis declared the year of St. Joseph, which we shall go shortly. We will not go anymore into these guide questions because they will come out later on in the guide questions for the theology of St. Joseph. We will go to the evolution and development of the theology of St. Joseph. Josephology is the study of St. Joseph's dignity, mission, and prerogatives. And let's have a look at this. St. Thomas Aquinas wrote extensively on the virginal marriage of St. Joseph to the Mother of God. Mary's parenthood was shared with Joseph. Jesus belonged to the family of Mary and Joseph. And then St. Augustine earlier wrote on the doctrine of the fatherhood of Joseph. Every good marriage was fulfilled in the parents of Christ. So you have offspring, loyalty, and sacrament. Since conjugal intercourse did not take place, according to this theological insight, the origin of the Christ was not in the physical, but in the moral order. Saint Joseph in the liturgy receives the second preeminence, second only to Mary, because of his being associated, the paternity, and or being his adopting Jesus, or making Jesus a member of that relationship of Joseph and Mary. And then later on, of course, Saint Joseph, patron of the universal church, of families, of interior life, of the poor, and patron of the workers. Now, I would like to focus on Pope Francis' apostolic letter, Patris Corde, recalling the 150th anniversary of the declaration of Saint Joseph, patron of the universal church. According to him, in this letter, in Joseph, Jesus saw the tender love of God. Take note of that, because we have also the Jesus is the tender love of God. But now Jesus saw in Joseph the tender love of God, the one that helps us accept our weakness, because it is true, and despite our fears, our frailties, and our weakness, that most divine designs are realized. And in this tender love, in the sacrament of the church, we discover that We experience that in the sacrament of confession and reconciliation. Pope Francis further says, Joseph is a father, an accepting father, because he accepted Mary unconditionally. An important gesture even today, says Pope Francis, in our world where psychological, verbal, and physical violence towards women is so evident. But the bridegroom of Mary is also the one who, trusting in the Lord, accepts in his life even the events that he does not understand, setting aside his own ideas and reconciling himself with his own history. Maybe this would be interesting to note, like for our lay people who are married, especially for the men, like Chacho and who else are there? You know, like, is it true that in the experience of husbands, it's a virtue for them to accept events that even that if that which they do not even understand. They would set aside their own ideas, but then they would reconcile themselves, or the husband, with his own history in silence, because there are many things that maybe he could not understand with regard to his wife, his family, his children, and with the world, and that he has just have to accept them and go through them in freedom. Saint Joseph, you mentioned this, a man of courage, but it's not just courage. Pope Francis describes him as a man of creative courage, which emerges especially in the way we deal with difficulties. The carpenter of Nazareth was able to turn a problem into a possibility by trusting in divine providence. Does this ring a bell? That's like almost a verbatim from Father Jules Chevalier, but also the many writings of Pope Francis. Some words in Fratelli Tutti or Laudato Si or the joy of the gospel. The words that he used there reflect very much also the vocabulary of Father Chevalier. Joseph had to deal with the concrete problems his family faced, problems faced by other families in the world, and especially those of migrants, in our present time. Saint Joseph is the special patron of all those forced to leave their native lands, in that sense. That the new Exodus, his trip, his escape to Egypt and back. So Joseph has become the special patron of all those forced to leave their native lands because of war, hatred, persecution, and poverty. As the guardian of Jesus and Mary, Joseph cannot be other than the guardian of the church. Take note of that, the guardian of the church. That's also the word of Father Chevalier. Later on, we will see that. Of her motherhood and of the body of Christ. Consequently, every poor, needy, suffering, or dying person, every stranger, every prisoner, every infirm person is the child whom Joseph continues to protect. From St. Joseph, writes Pope Francis, we must learn to love the church and the poor. That sounds Father George Chevalier. So this is the explosion of the pastoral dimension of the devotion to Saint Joseph. Not just confined to a nuclear or atomic family, but actually a person for all families and for all people, especially those who suffer and are poor. As a carpenter, a worker, Saint Joseph as worker, a carpenter who earned an honest living to provide for his family. Saint Joseph also teaches us the value, the dignity, and the joy of what it means to eat bread that is the fruit of one's own labor. Think of, a critique to corruption. Pope Francis appears in favor of work, which has become a burning social issue, even in countries with a certain level of well-being. There is a renewed need to appreciate the importance of dignified work, of which St. Joseph is an exemplary patron, the Holy Father writes. Incidentally, in the commentary on the Sabbath, Sabbath is also considered as a form of resistance to bonded labor. Sabbath or rest. The dignity of labor needs to rest, needs a quiet, needs a serenity in order for it to be rejuvenated, to be renewed, to have more strength, according to Pope John Paul, but at the same time as a resistance, a protest against bonded labor, when labor becomes so oppressive. Therefore, the declaration of the Sabbath of quiet, of silence, of rest, is a form of protest. Especially in light of rising unemployment, according to the apostolic letter, due to COVID-19, the Pope calls everyone to review our priorities and to express our firm conviction that no young person, no person at all, no family should be without work. This is a great challenge, especially in our time, because of our devotion to Saint Joseph the worker, Saint Joseph the carpenter. Pope Francis again says, with regard to Joseph as being a father, fathers are not born, but made. A man does not become a father simply by bringing a child into the world, but by taking up the responsibility to care for the child. Unfortunately, in today's society, children often seem orphans, lacking fathers who are able to introduce them to life and reality. Now, the chastity of the fatherhood of Joseph is described in this manner. This is the sense in which Saint Joseph is a most chaste father, which is the opposite of domineering possessiveness. Joseph, says Pope Francis, knew how to love with extraordinary freedom. He never made himself the center of things. He did not think of himself, but focused instead on the lives of Mary and Jesus. Now, where was the happiness of Joseph? There is the novena of Joseph. I don't know if you're acquainted with this, which is an interplay of sadness and joy. The sadness of Joseph and the joy of Joseph. The joy of Joseph and the sadness of Joseph. There is that novena. Now, where lies the happiness for Joseph? It's involved in a true gift of self. In him, we never see frustration, but only trust. His patient silence was the prelude to concrete expressions of trust. Joseph stands out, therefore, as an exemplary figure for our time in a world that needs fathers and not tyrants. That's very, very strong words from Pope Francis. We need Saint Joseph today in a society that rejects those who confuse authority with authoritarianism, service with servility, discussion with oppression, and charity with a welfare mentality, and power with destruction. Finally, as Saint Joseph is a beloved father, a tender and loving father, an obedient father, an accepted father, a father who is creatively courageous, a working father, a father in the shadows. I think this description of Pope Francis of the fatherhood of Joseph kinds of comprehensively synthesizes the biblical data and the development and the evolution and development of the history of the devotion of Joseph, of Saint Joseph. And so, in the quiet of our hearts, I invite you to pray together this prayer composed by Pope Francis for the year of Saint Joseph. Hail, guardian of the Redeemer, spouse of the Blessed Virgin Mary, to you God entrusted his only Son. In you Mary placed her trust, with you Christ became man. Blessed Joseph, to us too, show yourself a father and guide us in the path of life. Obtain for us grace, mercy, and courage, and defend us from every evil. Amen. Now, I wanted to pause there for your reflection. So I would like to suggest that for some few moments, let's gather our hearts, our minds, and our spirit in the quiet of our hearts and ask ourselves, what insights in the theology of St. Joseph resonate with me as a member of the Chevalier family? So I would like to suggest that we stay quiet for a while. Pray in our hearts and remember St. Joseph, the theology of St. Joseph, the appreciation of St. Joseph in sacred scripture, in the tradition and history of our church, and in our modern times, the imperatives of our modern times. You can write your insights in the chat box or share your insights in the chat box. And now let's have a quick look at the thoughts of Father Jules Chevalier. Anyone who is involved with the love of the heart of Jesus has to carry the sign of contradiction. You know, isn't he the son of Joseph, the carpenter? So the question here is, what is the place of Saint Joseph in the spirituality of the heart? And I was really trying to recall our prayer to Saint Joseph when I was in high school, looking for them. And also the question, like in the life of Father Jules Chevalier and in the foundation of our society and in the history, were there specific moments that we can pinpoint where Father Jules Chevalier turned to Saint Joseph, like he did to Our Lady But these are, I put here the thoughts of Father Jules, which I think has an resonates with the theology and the devotion to Saint Joseph in the history and tradition, in its history and tradition. For example, the poor are the privileged friends of the heart of Jesus. Can we remain insensitive to their spiritual and material poverty? We should see in them the living image of Christ. Let us never imitate that hardness of heart of those in the gospel who passed by the wounded man. Let us follow the example of the Good Samaritan. The love of his heart inspired Jesus to heal the many sick people who appealed to his power. During his earthly life, Jesus poured out all the tenderness of his heart on the little ones and on the poor, on those who suffer and on sinners. Let us not close our hearts to pity when along life's road we come across a person wounded by sorrow, bruised by ingratitude, calumny, or sin. And then here's a quotation on the March 19 calendar from Father Jules Chevalier. The Church has made Saint Joseph the protector of the great Christian family. We too should have a great confidence in him. From his meditations. And in the calendar of May 1st, there's a quote from the old MSC Constitution of 1877. Saint Joseph was the friend and guardian of Jesus and Mary. Let us place all our houses, now and in the future, under the outstanding care of Saint Joseph. In the MSC Constitution, the new Constitution of 1976, number 19, this is the only place we read this. We also honor Saint Joseph and place ourselves under the protection of that faithful and just man who was so closely united in love with Jesus and Mary. And this is a loaded statement, especially in the description of Joseph as a faithful and just man, and closely united in love with Jesus and Mary. And so we pray, Saint Joseph, protector of those who love and honor the Sacred Heart of Jesus, pray for us. Now, we will go now to our individual reflection. And taking into consideration the history and development of the devotion and theology of Saint Joseph, I posed a question there. What resonated in you? What was significant for you in the history of the devotion and in the development of the theology of Saint Joseph? And now, listening to Pope Francis and listening a little bit to Jules Chevalier, look now into your heart and reflect. What is the place of Saint Joseph in the spirituality of the heart? For you personally, do you have a devotion to Saint Joseph? Or as a community, do we have a devotion to Saint Joseph? Do we make March 19, especially for the men MPCs, and do we make March 19 or May 1st a big event in our community, or other activities other than the liturgical activities, like our pastoral action? Are they guided by the spirit of Joseph in the framework of spirituality of the heart? How are we expressing it? I give you a few minutes to put down, to capture your insights, to capture the whispers of your heart. And then we will go to our breakout sessions. That's right.
Reality.
So, welcome back.
You,
You look happy,
We are happy.
smiling. Okay, so let's try to have a look at the chat box and appreciate what people have written. Uh, okay, so from Ray Tibon, what I shared in the small group was that I was deeply struck by Father Ben's words on Joseph's silent witnessing and Joseph's discerning of the special vocation. And Sally, I like the sharing, Father Ray, Joseph's discerning of the special vocation. Okay, Lovis had problem with the computer. Father Jean Pejo, a new dimension of the role of Joseph, the theological reflection. Joseph, the silent protector of the silence of God. From time to time, we experience the seeming absence or silence of God. And now we will not be left alone in wrestling with the seeming silence of God because we have Saint Joseph as a companion. Terrific. I find from Jaime, I find interesting that it was the Pope in the life of Chevalier Pius IX that proclaimed Saint Joseph patron of Universal Church, and on an 8th of December of all days also. And okay, from Lily, what a beautiful experience this afternoon to reflect with Saint Joseph. From Jaime again, for me, the fact that he shows the tender love of God is key for the spirituality of the Chevalier family, together with the courage and protector of the vulnerable, his obedience and humility. That's right. This is you're right, Jaime. In the old ejaculatory forms, we have protector, we have model and patron of those who love the Sacred Heart. Yes, that's correct. And from Sister Jean, Jean, Saint Joseph was a right man. He can manage himself as a husband of Mary to keep Mary's virgin. Okay. Saint Joseph has a father's heart, capable of accepting our strengths and weaknesses. Thank you for that. And are there any other comments or reflections from your group sharing? Would you want me to call people or you volunteer yourself?
What's-
Can I volunteer?
Okay,
Yes.
good, Sally.
Yes, Sally.
I think with our sharing, we kind of felt that our older sisters, that they kind of imbibed this spirit of Saint Joseph and had him as part of their kind of almost like they call on Saint Joseph for many things, you know, oh, come on, Saint Joseph, or help us, Saint Joseph. And Sister Terry told a very good story about her father and an elderly aunt who was a sister of, and they got a flat tire, and her father got out of the car and fixed the flat tire, and the sister said, oh, thank you, Saint Joseph. And her father said, I not Saint Joseph, but that was kind of spirit of our older sisters, that they would ask Saint Joseph, especially for anything around money or new buildings or anything like that. I see my internet connection is my voice is coming through well. But anyway, so we felt that it was something that the older sisters had that perhaps we young now, but that we maybe didn't have in the same way. I don't know. But especially on the missions where there was a lot of hardship and difficulties, I think that the older generations called a lot on Saint Joseph. Perhaps that's something that we need to revive in the younger generation of religious.
Thank you, Sally.
I was
Yes,
quite
Lydia?
struck. I was quite struck by the phrase that came up a couple of times, that St. Joseph was creatively courageous. I thought that really summed up in his early days with Mary and Jesus the actions that he had to take. And he was creatively courageous. And that's a good thing for us to keep in mind as we are journeying along in life. Yes.
Thank you, Terry. Lila? Yes. Lila, you unmute yourself.
I just wanted to say I agree. I was happy with the reflection of.
Good.
I think in our group, Father, it came out like there was some kind of a recommendation that we revive the devotion to Saint Joseph, because if this is the way of promoting the spirituality of the heart, then maybe we can do that, because it seems like we relegated him somewhere. Now it's time to do that. I think Father Bong and Father Gian, even with my group with the daughters of the lay associates of daughters, I will also suggest that we do that so that we can reflect more about him. He's a beautiful man. Thank you.
Thank you, Lila. It's very good. From the parish setting, do we have, is Father Edwin still around? From the parish setting, or Tino?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yes. Okay, Father Edwin, we listen
But
to you.
our sharing is just the same as others have been sharing, like the qualities of Saint Joseph being mentioned: his love and care, his humility, his being a just man, his obedience, and his faith these are the qualities that we can say that is the place, his place in the spirituality of the heart. And also some mention in the group about his fatherly care, which is a need at this time when many are looking for fathers because they have no fathers. So we have Saint Joseph to be the intercessor and a help. So that's those are the things I've gathered from the sharing.
Thank you, Edwin. Yes, Nicola.
For me, that Joseph learned how to trust God, how to listen and to interpret the signs of the time, what to do, to know what to learn, what to do. He acted upon what he learned. So that is what also was said, courageously, being creative with courage, not saying, this is the end or what, positive, no? Continuing. And I think that is a great value in our time.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicola. I'd like to invite you to read Bona's reflection in the chat box. Saint Joseph went through the life of peripheries as refugee in Egypt with a great responsibility and hardship to protect Jesus and Mary. For this, I pray every day, asking his intercession, especially for the refugees from Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, Myanmar, etc. Also, for many families in difficulties and hardships. Thank you, Bona. Any other? Okay, so maybe just a few, just last words from me. Besides, being grateful that we are here together, we really need to continue to explore the role of Saint Joseph in our life as a Chevalier family from our foundation until now, and to explore new ways of imitating him in his creative courage as a father. And I think the proclamation of Pope Francis of the year of the child, of the year of Joseph in this year, I think that's very, very instructive for us. And to me, it resonates our newness, for example, from our devotion to reparation of the Sacred Heart, the devotional aspect, towards more now the pastoral aspect of repairing the world through justice, peace, and integrity of creation, the mission. I think those are very, very profound and worth looking into. Secondly, what Lila shared, that we need probably to not just to revive the devotion to Saint Joseph, but to refound it in a new way. In the MSc.
Oh, gyoza to nimo.
In the MSc parishes, the devotion to the Sacred Heart and to Saint Joseph was really, really strong. And Our Lady of the Sacred Heart. And then later on, I think we kind of lag behind, and maybe we need to have a new sense of refounding in a new way, in a new key. Okay. So thank you very much. Now I turn you over to our host for this session.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it
Thank
Sophie?
you very much.
Sophie, unmute yourself.
Yes. Okay, I'll repeat. Thank you, Ben, for your wonderful presentation. We all know Saint Joseph is pictured in the scripture as a silent saint, a man of few words. You have made him more visible to us through your presentation and through the scriptures. His silence allowed him to listen to the dreams and to be attuned to the will of God. So we have somebody to look upon, to call upon during the silence of God in our life. Thank you, Ben, and for your presentation, and thanks to all our Shavel and families for your participation and sharing in this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.